picker, it's all set and ready to go.
Okay, so they're gonna run it from here?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Can you hear me, Doug? Okay, we'll call this meeting of the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners for Saturday, June 24th, 2017 at 8:30 a.m. to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Drew. Lynn, would you call the roll of the commission, please?
Chairman Wallace,
Here?
Vice Chairman Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Albert. Here. Commissioner Barr.
Here.
Commissioner Drew.
Here.
Commissioner Huff. Here. Commissioner McNish.
Here.
Commissioner Valentine.
Here.
Commissioner Young.
Will the County Advisory Board please stand and announce themselves?
Paul Dixon, Clark.
Mike Reeves, Clark.
Bob Rittenhouse, Douglas.
Ed Washout. Joe Grimm, Virgin.
Thank you and welcome. We'll move to agenda item number 15, approval of the minutes. Chairman Wallace for possible action. Commission minutes from the April and May 2017 meetings will be discussed for approval. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from those two meetings? Questions or comments on the minutes? Commissioner Valentine.
Chairman, thank you, Chairman Wallace. I just wanted to make note that on the minutes of the May meeting, I was not in attendance for the last item, but I think I feel comfortable in voting on the item.
Thank you, Commissioner Valentine. Commissioner Barnes?
I was not in attendance at the May meeting, so I will be abstaining.
Anything further? Commissioner Johnston.
I just had two comments from the minutes from the April meeting. On page 3, when we were discussing, I think it was after it says Commissioner Drew moved, it says Commissioner Johnston said he's frustrated with the legislature being able to tweak. I think my comment was more directed at not their ability to tweak the rules, but their activity in doing that. So I'd like to have that. Commissioner Johnson said he's frustrated with the legislature tweaking the rules every 2 years. That's unfair to the people who apply, who pay the fee when they apply, and does not allow the department and the commission to move through the plans without a change. That was, I think, what my comment really was. So I'd like that reflected in the minutes if possible, and I can give more concrete comment. And then on page 6, there's another statement where I made a comment. Commissioner Johnson said the proposed amendment is a step in a worse direction as he understands the proposed legislative should be legislation. And that's my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnston. Anything further from the commission? I'll take it out to public comment on the minutes for April or May 2017. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. I think I'd be looking for a motion for each one separately. That way, for commissioners that may not have been at the meeting, they could vote for each one or separately. Commissioner Johnston.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to approve the minutes from the April 2017 commission meeting as presented with the 2 changes that I suggested in my comments.
I have a motion by Commissioner Johnston with a second by Commissioner Valentine to approve the April 2017 minutes as presented with the changes that Commissioner Johnston stated. Is everyone clear with the motion? Call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimous, 8-0 with Commissioner Young absent.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to approve the minutes from the May 2017 commission meeting as presented.
I have a motion by Commissioner Johnston and a second by Commissioner Drew to approve the May 2017 minutes as presented. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously, 8-0, again with Commissioner Young absent.
And one abstention. It was like
Oh,
7-0.
I'm sorry. Correct. One abstention. Commissioner Barnes abstained from the May vote. We'll close agenda item number 15 and move to agenda item number 16, approval of the agenda. Chairman Wallace for possible action. The commission will review the agenda and may take action to approve the agenda. The commission may remove items from the agenda, continue items for consideration, or take items out of order. Questions or comments on the agenda? Seeing none, this is an action item. I'll take it out to public comment on the approval of the agenda. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I have a motion by Commissioner McNinch and a second by Commissioner Valentine to approve the agenda as presented. Questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously, 8-0. Commissioner Young absent. Moving to agenda item number 17, member items and announcements and correspondence. Chairman Wallace, informational. Commissioners may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. The commission will review and may discuss correspondence sent or received by the commission since the last regular meeting and may provide copies of the exhibit file. Commissioners may provide hard copies of their correspondence for the written record, and correspondence sent or received by Secretary Wasley may also be discussed. Commission items. Commissioner Drew?
Yeah, two items. The first is in regards to the tag results that recently were posted online, and then I think email and hard copy receipts have since come out. But past Commissioner Bliss had contacted me and had someone that had contacted him asking why the results on Hunt, Nevada had indicated that a couple of these individuals had been ineligible for the Silver State tag drawing. They weren't shown on the unsuccessful list, but rather the ineligible list. And I guess their question was, if I was ineligible for that drawing, why is it that I was charged $25? And I contacted Maureen, and she explained to me that the Silver State tag did draw first, and that those ineligible applicants should have shown as unsuccessful. However, when I got my email and hard copy receipt, I did notice that the ineligibility was still applicable, at least on my Silver State applications. And it was specific to the tags where I had drawn in the main draw. But I think that that designation has created some confusion with folks as to if they truly were ineligible, or how the drawing was conducted, if it was conducted in the proper order. And I think it was. I think it's more an issue of how that was posted and how it came out on the receipts. So I don't know if there's any way to clarify that with folks, but I think it would be a good idea to address that and maybe send a follow-up correspondence that explains why it was shown that way, because that is an important program that has a lot of interest and generates a lot of revenue for the Heritage account, which we talked about yesterday. So I think to not address that would probably create a lot of problems. So maybe something this commission could address going forward, or maybe the department or SCI has some comments on it. But either way, I think there needs to be some clarification provided to folks, because those questions are coming up, and I've since had it asked of me directly a couple of times. So that was my first item. The second item, I think it's pretty publicly out of the bag. This will be my last meeting. I'm not going to address a whole lot. I want to focus on getting through the meeting and serving out my term through the end of this month. So I'm not going to say a whole lot other than it's been a privilege and an honor to serve the state of Nevada. Really appreciate Governor Sandoval trusting me with this appointment. I've met some great friends and great people, and I think we've done some wonderful things for wildlife in this state. And I don't want people to think I'm taking my last meeting lightly, but I have a commitment on the table to attend the August meeting, and I'll address folks a little bit more at that time with my parting thoughts. But for today, I think I'll focus on getting through this agenda, and just wanted to let folks know I've really appreciated my time here and the friendships I've developed and the great things we've done. So that's probably all I'll talk about now, other than to say that we will have some sort of festivity in August, and everyone's going to be invited, including families and friends. So once I have some more details on that in conjunction with the meeting in August, I'll let everyone know.
Thank you, Commissioner Drew, and I'm not going to go too deep into it either. We'll save that for August, but I appreciate your service to Nevada, and I consider you a pretty good friend after all of this, and I too met great people and appreciate it, and we'll make sure we honor you properly in August. Further commission items? Commissioner Hubbs.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this morning I did get a call from Bill Young, and he has asked me to speak about the issue that I brought up yesterday. The correspondence from Bud Ogun, so I'm going to go ahead and speak on his behalf when the time's appropriate, but he obviously is trying to catch his plane and wasn't able to come in when he wanted to this morning.
Thank you, Commissioner Hubbs. Further commission items? Director Wasley, do you have anything? Okay. We'll close agenda item number 17, move to agenda item number 18. County advisory boards to manage wildlife member items, informational. CAB members may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action will be scheduled on a future commission agenda. Any CAB items? Okay. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. Close agenda item number 18, move to agenda item number 19. Commission regulation adoption for possible action, public comment allowed. Commission regulation CR 16-13, amendment number 1, upland game and fur bearer seasons, bag limits and special regulations, 2017-2018. Wildlife Staff Specialist Sean Espinosa and Wildlife Staff Specialist Russell Wolstenhume. The Commission will consider amendments to this regulation for seasons, bag limits, and special regulations for upland game birds, rabbits, wild turkey, fur bearers, and falconry seasons for 2017-2018. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Chairman Wallace. Is this on?
Yeah, I think it's voice activated.
I think it's on. Okay. Thank you, Chairman Wallace. Good morning to members of the Commission. Sean Espinoza, Upland Game Staff Specialist with the Nevada Department of Wildlife. For the record, for Commission Regulation 16-13, Amendment Number 1, the Department basically has 4 recommendations, and I understand that there's also additional recommendations that may be out there by the public or through the county advisory boards, but we should probably go ahead and maybe address the 4 major changes that I have and then get into maybe the public's recommendation after that. But we could take these one at a time, probably. That would be best. And really the first substantial change is to the mountain quail season. Basically, we wanted to draw mountain quail out of the hunt table for Californian Gambel's quail and make it its own separate season, just to clarify what the limits are with a daily bag limit of 2 and possession limit of 4, and then also to draw attention to the special note or regulation there to please report that those harvests to the Nevada Department of Wildlife for mountain quail. And I think this was something that was brought up last year by the Washoe County Advisory Board, so we wanted to make sure and pay attention to that.
Commissioner Drew.
Sean, I appreciate that, and I think it's a lot more clear, and I think the information will be helpful to you guys, given the amount of trap and transplant that's been going on in recent years. My only question was on the possession limit. I think we had this discussion either last year or the year before about why mountain quail was, 4 and everything else was 3 times the daily limit. So is there a concern if we make that 6, just to be consistent with our other species?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Drew. No, not from my standpoint. I don't think a possession limit of 6 would be all that detrimental to mountain quail.
Further questions from the commission for John? Okay, I think I'll take it out to public comment on that real quick. Public comment on the mountain quail season? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Yeah, I think we'll look for a motion on that part and get that cleared up. Commissioner Drew?
Yeah, I would move to approve that portion of CR 16-13, amendment number 1, specific to the changes proposed by the department to quail, California and Gambles, as well as mountain quail, with one change, and that would be to change the possession limit on mountain quail from 4 to 6.
I have a motion by Commissioner Drew and a second by Vice Chairman Johnston to approve the California and Gambles quail and mountain quail with the changes noted in the possession limit from 4 to 6 for mountain quail, otherwise as presented by the department.
Just for clarification, Sean, you're not looking for any anything else in terms of the youth seasons or the other species that haven't changed? Those regulations would stay as is, correct?
That's
Just
correct,
for
yeah.
clarity.
Commissioner Valentine?
Would this motion include the season dates as posted? And I know, I thought we might want to discuss changing the season dates on our upland game.
Yes,
And
so
consider-
the motion that I made would include all the season dates, but this would probably be the appropriate time to discuss any changes, I think, per the correspondence we've received.
But the motion is only for quail, is that correct?
It is, but I think if we're going to change season dates, we would probably want to make everything consistent.
Okay.
Would be my thought.
So are you withdrawing your motion?
No, not at this point. I think we could probably do it like we did yesterday. If there's a proposed amendment, we could discuss the merits of that.
Okay.
Would be my thought.
All right, well then, we should have some discussion on the seasons then before we call for the question then.
Would it be easier for me to withdraw my motion at this time?
I think it might be.
Because there may be some public comment? Okay,
Yes,
so
'cause we haven't done public
I'll
comment on that.
withdraw my motion at this time, and for the sake of further discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner Drew. Does the second agree?
Sure.
Okay. So, Commissioner Hubbs?
Okay, thank you. I think now is the time. I personally actually, and I think many of us may have received a phone call from a gentleman down, I think he lives and resides near Lincoln County. I'm not 100% sure, but he's down south, more down south in southern Nevada. His name is Mr. Robert Ogun, and he was interested in mentioning or discussing coinciding the dates for the upland game bird season with the opening of, or overlapping into deer season. There's usually a week, I think, between the beginning of the upland game bird season and the deer season. He stated he had several concerns and has for some time that it's difficult to go up and hunt after the deer season has taken place, that there's an impact to the game birds and the success of the hunts for various reasons. Some of those, he thinks that there may be some poaching going on. I'm not 100% sure. That's what I had down in my notes. He also stated that for a lot of people in southern Nevada that it's hard to get up in those areas, coordinate travel. It's expensive to go up there, and so a lot of them would like to go up to deer hunt and also be able to go chukar hunting too. So it would be an economic relief to have them take place at the same time. He also had some concern that it seems that that date always shifts, that it can't be established concrete so he can plan. I think this gentleman actually goes up and takes people up to go hunting gameland birds. So there's some logistical issues for him to coordinate getting people out to hunt because the date is not set. And so he wanted to see if there could be a setting of a permanent date in the first or second week of, I think it's a Saturday in October. And I think that covers what I have from him, and if I've misstated anything and anyone knows that I have, please let me know.
Thank you, Commissioner Hubbs, and I have a suspicion that this might be the gentleman right here, and I was going to welcome you to come up for public comment.
Thank you. My name's Robert Ogan, and I was the one that I'm trying to get a set season, a set date for the upland game. We've never had one. Most of your states have one out here in the West. There's a lot of reasons for it. People that can only get a deer tag every 2 or 4 years in this state now, but they may have family or friends. They still want to go out camping. Most of your hunters are from Reno or Las Vegas. They got a long way to travel. So they go up there. If they go along with the proposal this year, I believe at what it was last year, the second Saturday, you're looking at deer season in most areas open up October 5th. So if it opens up October 14th, that's 9 days later than the deer season, okay? It's doing a disservice to the people in this state that have to travel. The other thing is, we usually don't find out until the season opens for sure, until around August. So how do you book vacations? And me as an outfitter, speaking as an outfitter, not a sportsman now, or both, how do you book hunts? Because if it was that way for the deer hunters, you wouldn't have a seat in here if it wasn't filled. Because everybody would be in here demanding a set season. To me, it just makes sense. It's the right thing to do, you know. Former Commissioner Jim Jeffers wanted to do that. He says, I live up north. He says, I can go anytime. But he says, for the people traveling a long distance, he says, it's not right. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment? Come on up, Mike.
For the record, Mike Reese. I'm here representing myself. I think everybody in this room, from the time you were able to hunt, knows that dove season starts September 1st, regardless of what day of the week that falls on. There's been a movement, especially down here in the South, to set that date. The date that we've all talked about has been October 1st. And you hunt dove, it ends the 30th, bam, you can go on the 1st. It doesn't mean everybody's going to go out there. But if somebody drew a deer tag and wants to go up 2 or 3 days early, scout or do whatever, the season's already open. It's been open for a couple days. You're legal. You can go in and do that. I think economically it benefits the sportsman. Scientifically, it doesn't have any effect on our upland game, and I would love to see it go to October 1st. The final clincher to me was last year in our CAB meeting when I asked our game warden, when does quail season open? I don't know. I got to look. I said, how about October 1st? For our law enforcement, everybody knows dove season's September 1st, and I think for our youth, if we just start teaching them upland game, starts on October 1st, wherever it is, I think it simplifies everything, and it makes it very conducive for people to go up ahead of time scouting and shooting two upland game and big game at the same time, if you're able to get a big game. So I would love to see it go to October 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Further public comment?
Good morning. My name is Len Swedberg. I guide for On Point Guide Service, and I'm here to support Mr. Ogan and your outfitters that do upland birds. I agree with everything that they said, and I'm basically here to support them. I do believe that October 1st would work out really, really good. And concerning families and traveling and stuff, the overlap between bird season and deer season would be great. What happens when a child gets his deer opening day? What else is there to do? They're just going to camp. It sure be nice to go out and hunt some upland game, and that would be great. And we're trying to bring these youths into this world of ours and get them off the streets and away from all the junk that's out there. And I think by opening up October 1st and overlapping the deer season with the bird season at that point would be just a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Grant, for kind of backing up here, because I got confused when you were handling how you wanted to do this. Clark County Cab had a pretty extensive discussion about the season opening dates for all your game birds, your upland game birds. And I think everything has been said here, but just to give you an idea, I had 16 members of the public at my meeting, and 14 of those people raised their hand and said, we support moving to a fixed date start, be it 10/1, 10/6, but a fixed date start rather than the first, second weekend or whatever it is for the hunt season. And that was in my recommendation that came to you guys. So I just wanted to follow that back up. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Further public comment? Come on up.
Hi there. My name is Scott McClure, and I live here in Las Vegas, and I just want to concur with what everybody is saying. I agree with, or I would hope that October 1st would be the start of a set season, but even if it was a little bit later, a set season would be very beneficial, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission for another try at this. Further comments from the commission? Commissioner Elmberg.
Yeah, I just want to note that the Carson Cab did not want to support a fixed date. And then I had a question, and maybe it's to Sean or someone else's. As it was noted, people don't get the opportunity to hunt deer on an annual basis. It may be every 3 years. What is the impact in the field to those deer hunters that have waited 3 years to get their tag? And then what is the impact of all the additional bird pressure? What would you anticipate that to be? Would there be a conflict?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Almberg. Sean Espinoza, for the record, Upland Game Staff Specialist. While there will certainly be a lot more people in the field with having that earlier opening date. So overlap of use, it's hard for me to speak to. It kind of depends on the year and what's going on with that year with precipitation and so forth. But, you know, competition for campsites, more people on quads on the roads, those sorts of things would be something to consider for sure.
Commissioner Drew.
Just while Sean's up there, Sean, any thoughts on switching from, you know, what's, for as long as I can remember, always been a second Saturday in October opener to a fixed date, and whether that's something that you see an issue with, either maybe on the biological side of things, and if you'd have a druther one way or the other with where we're at?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Commissioner Drew. Sean Espinoza again for the record, Upland Game Staff Specialist. So there's basically 2 times of the year that you could have additive harvest effects, mortality effects on chukars. And that's early in the season when they're tied to water, whether it's a water development or a spring, and then late in the season, if we get the right type of snowpack conditions, you could have additive mortality at that time too. Largely over the last several years, last decade really, we haven't really had those type of snowpack conditions to really have that additive effect other than some portions of northeastern Nevada. Northwestern Nevada and Humboldt County, it's been, you know, more of a rain on snow type events, warming events that have opened up a lot of habitat down low. However, early in the season when birds are tied to water, you can have an effect. And I looked at some literature that was available from Dr. Randy Larson over at BYU, And they looked at 43 different study sites in western Utah and northeastern Nevada, springs and water developments. And they were basically finding by about mid-October, birds ceased to use water sources. So anything we can do to at least allow that first part of October as a reprieve period for birds to pull off water, I think is a good thing and rather prudent in my biological opinion. I would say over the last decade, there's been probably 6 of those years where we experienced some rainstorms or even small snowstorms that have pulled birds off of water, and they weren't as reliant. So I think that that's a pretty important thing as well. And one other thing to mention is that when you have birds using water developments and you have people drawn to them, they were seeing events in Utah where folks were shooting right into the water development and killing birds in the water development and also putting holes in the apron of the guzzler. So that's another thing to consider by having an earlier opener, whether it's for quail or chukar.
Further questions from the commission? Commissioner Hubbs?
So right now, the date tends to be around the first or second week of October. Is that it? Second. Okay, so that's closer toward the mid-month deadline that or timeline that he's talking about in terms of their tendency to pull off water. And there's never an overlap with the mule deer season that would extend to mid-October. Is that right?
Exactly, because the deer seasons that start October 5th run to October 20th, I believe. So there's always some overlap between the upland season and the early deer season, and then there's complete overlap between the later deer hunts and other hunting seasons in the chukar season. So that, if you have an early season deer tag and it starts on October 5th and goes to the 20th and you want to go out and chukar hunt too, then you can't spend the full amount of time from the 5th to the 20th out in the field. You just start your deer hunt later. But I mean, I have a concern about a fixed date. If you were to say the chukar season's going to start, pick a date, October 1, October 5th, whatever that date is. How many chukar hunters then miss opening day because they can't take a day off work to make that opening day? A lot of people will take a long weekend, they leave on Friday, they get their camp set up, they hunt Saturday and Sunday, they can be home and back to work on Monday. If all of a sudden you make the opening day falls on a Wednesday, I think there's going to be a lot of chukar hunters out there who are not going to have that traditional opening day experience that we're accustomed to when it falls on the Saturday. I guess I have some other comments as well, is that it seems what we're hearing is people who draw an early deer tag that starts on the 5th want to be able to hunt chukar too, and that we're going to try to adjust the upland season to accommodate those who draw the deer tag. And I don't think that warrants a change to the season, especially hearing from Mr. Espinoza as to the biological reasons to have the season start a little bit later in October. I would not be in favor of moving the start date of the upland season earlier into October.
I don't really want to start into this because we've already taken public comment. Because if I do that, then we've created a precedent for the rest of the. Commissioner Drew.
Sean, if it's not.
I'm not gonna, look, what's before us right now is the upland game season. I haven't had anyone come when we set the dove season and say we don't want it September 1st, but we're asking to be making a change from the second Saturday in October. I have a biologist telling me right now that there are biological reasons to have the season start in the middle of October because of the birds being tied to water. So one, there's a biological reason. That first and foremost tells me we don't move the season up. The second issue, though, is I think you're going to have a hunter congestion issue if you tie the opening of the chucker season to the same date as the early deer seasons. You will have more people in the field. Now, my question, how does that impact then those who draw that early deer tag and say, I'm going to go the first week, I'm going to go early in that on October 5th because I know the chucker hunters won't be out there until midway through my tag. You know, there was a poaching concern. I mean, if people are out there shooting chucker before the season starts because they happen to be in the field for a deer hunt, that is not a reason at all to change the season dates. That's an enforcement issue, and people shouldn't be doing it. So that's a complete non-concern of mine. I have a lot of reservations and a lot of issues about this, and it seems that we're trying to simply give people who draw a deer tag the opportunity to hunt both during that first period from the 5th until the 2nd Saturday of October, and I'm not so certain the changes to benefit that small group of people are worth the change.
Commissioner Drew.
I think the biggest issue this year is probably with the calendar shift, and it just happens that the second Saturday falls on the 14th this year instead of the 8th or the 10th or something like that. So I think if we went to October 1st, I think you'd probably have more people up north who are pretty much know that second Saturday has kind of been the traditional opener, that it'd be steamed about why are you opening chucker season on Sunday. To be honest, I guess my only question, Sean, is with that calendar shift, does it make any sense to slide the youth hunt back a week for this 1 year, or are you comfortable with where that's at given the limited participation that we have in that event?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Commissioner Drew. Sean Espinoza for the record, Upland Game Staff Specialist. I'm actually comfortable with where the youth season sits right now, and it is a week-long youth season. It's 9-day season, so we've increased that from a 2-day season to a 9-day season to give folks more opportunity there for their kids.
Commissioner Drew.
Yeah, just to throw it out there, Mr. Ogan contacted me. I think there was some merit in what he was proposing, but to be honest, I didn't see the support for the change from some of the cabs, at least in my region of the state. I think the tradition probably weighs more heavily on me. I'm comfortable with where things are at least, you know, I'm a passionate bird hunter, I'm a passionate big game hunter, and I think the system we have in place is working pretty well right now. And so given that, I'm comfortable with the original motion that I had made, especially in light of Mr. Espinoza's comments today. I'm not seeing overwhelming support or compelling reason to change at this time, especially given that I think primarily what we're dealing with is a 1-year calendar shift.
I agree with you, Commissioner Drew, and I think until Mr. Espinoza spoke about the biologic reasons, that's what changed my mind as well, and to me that's the important part, is protecting the resource, and so I'm not in support of changing the dates either. Commissioner Valentine.
After being approached by Mr. Ogan, I tended to agree with his concept of a date certain, in keeping with our big game season dates. It made a lot of sense to me, but once Mr. Espinoza brought up the biological impact that it might have on an early October opening, I tend to agree with staying with the same dates.
Further commission comments? Commissioner Hubbs.
Of course, for me, I'm always concerned about the wildlife too, so I give a lot of credence to your remark about them drawing off water and when they do it, and that actually each year you can't pin it down to a specific date, so it puts the wildlife in a place where they are vulnerable. I would not support that for that reason. I want to say I do appreciate the tenacity that Mr. Ogan has in reaching out to the commissioners and trying to work through this process, and I respect that. And I think he did a really good job. And if I could support some type of ease of travel from down in the hot desert to get up there and hunt, I would for that reason. But the wildlife has to come first and take precedence, and for that reason, I would not support fixing the date.
Further commission comments? Commissioner Drew, do you have a motion?
Sure. I would move to approve that portion of CR 16-13 Amendment Number 1, 2017-18 upland game seasons as proposed for the youth chukar and Hungarian partridge season, chukar and Hungarian partridge, California and Gambel's quail, and mountain quail, with only one change, and that being that the possession limit on mountain quail be changed from 4 to 6.
I have a motion by Commissioner Drew and a second by Commissioner Johnston to approve the portion of CR 16-13 Amendment 1, upland game, youth chukar, Hungarian partridge season, chukar and Hungarian partridge, California and Gambel's quail, and mountain quail as presented, with the one change of changing the possession limit on mountain quail from 4 to 6. Is everyone clear on the motion? Call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously, 8-0. Go ahead, John.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Wallace. Once again, Sean Espinoza for the record, Upland Game Staff Specialist. The next change we have recommended is a change to the junior wild turkey season. Our recommendation is to divide the season for Hunt Unit 115 in White Pine County into 2 separate seasons with 2 tags each for the junior hunt, and also to establish a junior wild turkey hunt for Pershing County, and likewise there with 2 seasons with 2 tags for each one of those seasons.
Questions for Sean? Commissioner Valentine?
Mr. Espinoza, what's the reasoning for splitting the seasons in 115?
Really, the biologists mentioned because of the number of tags that there was, and being a concurrent season with the adult season, that there was a lot of hunter overlap there. So splitting the 2 seasons or putting it into 2 seasons would likely reduce congestion around the outside of the park.
Further questions for Sean? Seeing none, I will take it out to public comment on the junior wild turkey hunt. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Drew?
Yeah, I would move to approve that portion of Commission Regulations CR 16-13 Amendment Number 1 specific to the wild turkey junior seasons for 2017 and 18 as presented by the department.
I have a motion by Commissioner Drew with a second by Commissioner Barnes to approve the junior wild turkey 2017-2018 hunt portion of CR 1613 as presented by the department. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimous, 8-0. Moving on, Sean?
Okay, our next recommended change is to the spring limited entry wild turkey hunt, an increase in the number of tags available in Hunt Unit 151 and 152, going from 2 tags to 3 tags in Lander County. And then also, likewise with the youth season, to divide the season for Hunt Unit 115 in White Pine County into 2 separate seasons with 15 resident and 1 non-resident tag each for that unit.
Thank you, Sean. Questions for Sean? Seeing none, I'll take it out to public comment on wild turkey 2017-2018 spring limited entry.
For the record, Mike Reese, representing myself. I don't have an issue with the turkey season, but I brought a picture. I wanted to show all you guys. I wanted to show it to Sean. We've done a good job of transplanting turkeys down into Lincoln County. This happens to be in Rainbow Canyon. We've got 20 turkeys right here that are on the verge of being domesticated. I'm hoping we can look at next year doing some kind of a project where we could transplant these probably up onto Panaca Summit or something where they'd be able to be huntable. and stuff. We haven't had any seasons down there, but there's a great number of turkeys. They're staying all at the ranches and stuff instead of roosting back up in the hills and stuff. So in that picture right there, there's 20 turkeys at one time in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Further public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Drew?
Move to approve that portion of Commission Regulations CR 16-13 Amendment Number 1 for the wild turkey 17 and 18 spring limited entry hunts 0131 and 0132 as presented by the department.
I have a motion by Commissioner Drew and a second by Commissioner Valentine to approve wild turkey 2017-2018 spring limited entry hunts 0131 and 0132 as presented by the department. Questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously, 8-0.
Thank you, Chairman Wallace. Once again, Sean Espinoza for the record, Nevada Department of Wildlife, Upland Game Staff Specialist. My last recommended change, at least for the upland game portion of CR 16-13 Amendment Number 1, is to add a fall turkey, wild turkey hunt for Paradise Valley, hunt number 0135 and 0137. That would be open from October 7th through October 29th of 2017. And this is something that Humboldt County wanted to see.
Is that request, Sean, just based on the population increase? I know there's a lot of birds in Paradise Valley, but just so it's on the record, is that what's going on?
Yes, and a couple of ranches in particular have a pretty high number of birds on their properties. So it flocks in excess of 60 plus birds.
Further questions? Commissioner Olmberg?
Are they allowing the hunting on their private property right now?
They are, yeah.
Further questions? Seeing none, I'll take it out to public comment on wild turkey 2017 hunt 0135 and 0137. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Drew.
Move to approve that portion of Commission Regulation CR 16-13 Amendment Number 1 specific to the wild turkey 2017 fall hunt 0135 and 0137 for Paradise Valley of Humboldt County as presented by the department.
I have a motion by Commissioner Drew and a second by Commissioner Olmberg to approve the wild turkey hunt 2017 fall hunts 0135 and 0137 as presented by the department. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously 8-0. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Staff Specialist Russell Wilson-Hume for the fur-bearing portion. But before I do, I just wanted to thank Commissioner Drew for his service for all these years, and it's been a real pleasure working with you. Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, Russell Wilson-Hume, Nevada Department of Wildlife, Fur Bearer Staff Specialist. Before I go into the regulations this morning, I wanted to just go through a quick PowerPoint and just give a brief overview of what it is that we do with the in order to determine our bobcat seasons. So first off, our approach is a three-prong approach. The data that we look at in order to determine what the status of the bobcat population is. We look at production, which is a very, very important factor. We look at adult male to adult female ratio. We look at combination of effort and harvest levels. And so now I want to talk about how this whole process works. So for production is the greatest single influence on population growth. So it's kind of logical that when we have big production, the populations are going to follow that trend. When the production declines, populations will fall following that. So the question is what influences production? Well, there's a lot of different things that can influence production. But the biggest thing is really going to be resource availability. So what changes that resource availability being prey species? And with most wildlife species, as we know, living in the driest state in the nation, that production in most things is really tied to precipitation. And I found that to be true with looking at our bobcat data. So I took a look at what happens when we have big moisture years. And what this graph shows you on the left-hand axis there is precipitation, and the bottom is kittens per 100 females. And you can see that this is our actual Nevada data graphed out here, and the trend line there in the middle shows you that when precipitation goes up, absolutely production goes up. This is statewide. I broke this down actually in when I was looking at this and looked at the Mojave region, which is even a drier portion of our state, and it was even more closely tied to precipitation, which makes a lot of sense there. But statewide, overall, precipitation goes up, we're going to see more production. All right, with adult male and adult female ratios, what we see is that this ratio is really important because it can indicate overutilization. And how that works is males are more susceptible to capture. There's a study, a couple of pictures here, diagrams from a study, and what you see is non-breeding and breeding home ranges. So the male home range is the dark line, the solid line, and the female home range is the spotted line. And in both occurrences, breeding and non-breeding, you can see that the male's range is much, much larger. And I'll get to why that's important here in a minute. And then also, in a healthy population, males are typically less numerous. Males have a higher rate of, a lower rate of survival. And so what you see over time is, so these numbers that are shown here, this isn't actual numbers, this is ratio. So at birth, you typically find a 1-to-1 ratio, 100 to 100. So by the first year, that has dropped within the same group of kittens that were born. By the second year, that group of kittens is down to an 82 to 100 ratio, male-female ratio, because the males have a higher rate of loss. And then over time, you can see how that declines. So with the larger home range and with the higher rate of loss to the males, the adult population is going to have a higher number of males than a higher number of females than males. And why this is important, these two factors, is because we're looking at that male to female ratio. And if in our harvest records, if we start harvesting males and females at an equal rate, at a 1-to-1 rate, then it's an indication that we're hitting the population too hard. The population's declining at a rate that is unacceptable, and we need to start looking at responding in our seasons in that regard. So that's the importance of the adult male to adult female ratios. When it comes to our harvest and our effort, again, this is Nevada data plotted out here. So the lines that go through that are statewide means. And so when you plot this out, you see you've got, looking at harvest effort, on the left-hand side of this graph, you've got really low harvest effort, and on the right-hand side you have high effort, and the same thing with annual harvest. The bottom half is low harvest, and the top half is high harvest. So anything that's on the left-hand side of the graph there, the low harvest effort's an indicator of how frequently you're encountering a bobcat. And so a low effort means high rate of encounter. So that means it's an indicator that the population is high. And vice versa on the right-hand side, the more effort it takes, that means the less chance of incident of occurring of a bobcat. So it starts to raise questions about why is it taking so much effort to find a bobcat. It probably means that the population is going down. So as we look at this graph, so if the chance of occurrence is high, low effort, it's an indication that the population is doing well. On the other hand, on the other side, then I start asking the question, what's going on here? So of these 4 quadrants on this, if I have high effort and low annual harvest, then it really starts raising the question to me, what's happening with the population? And then that's when I got to start looking at what's going on. And so none of these things by themselves, the 3 indicators that I look at by themselves tell the whole story. I've got to look at all of them. So then I start looking, if one of them indicates, hey, this is going on, take a look at what else is going on. And I combine all those 3 things together to come up with my biological assessment of what's happening within the population to make my recommendations. So in the past, when these things have happened, when indicators show that there's a population decline or a population increase, there's just a record of the past 10 years of our seasons, and you can see that 5 of the last 10 years the department has responded to things in the population that would indicate a decrease by decreasing the season length. So last year, this commission asked me, when we were setting bobcat seasons for 2 years, to come back and revisit this year, see what was going on, and take another look at it. And that's exactly what I've done and why I'm here today. So at this point, before I go into the season recommendations, is there any questions about what I just kind of went over? I know it gets kind of deep, but as a biologist, I get really excited about this stuff. So,
Questions for Russell? Commissioner Hubbs.
What is the average lifespan for a bobcat?
well, in the wild, you're looking at for a male probably 4 to 6 years, and for a female probably 7 to 9-ish, in that range. I mean, there's a lot of factors. Some of them don't make it a week. Some of them might make it 12 years. You know, it's just, but that's kind of the averages. And when they're in captivity, then it's much longer. They can go 18, 20 years in some cases.
Further questions for Russell? Seeing none, let's go ahead and move into your the rest of your presentation.
All right, based on the data that came out in our data this past year, our production levels this year were 94 kittens per 100, which is the second year in a row of 94 kittens per 100, which is 94 kittens per 100 is our 5th highest we've ever recorded in the nearly 40 years of data that we have. And back-to-back years with that high of production, it's the second highest back-to-back production that we've seen in our nearly 40-year history. As far as our adult male to female ratio, it was 161 males per 100 females, which is the 4th highest that we've seen in our records, which is another good indicator that the population is very strong. And then our harvest effort was 133 trap days per bobcat, which is the 6th lowest that we've seen, which is also a good indicator that the population is very strong. So after a couple of years of 94 kittens per 100, and these other indicators, there's every reason to believe that our population is increasing right now. And because of that, the department has come forward with this recommendation of changing the season dates from the last Saturday in November to November 1st, going through the last day of February, and then just to be compliant with how we've operated in the past, also recommending that gray fox seasons be those same dates. I'll go to that point.
Thank you, Russell. Questions for Russell? Commissioner Hubbs?
In terms of the gray fox, what's the average lifespan for the gray fox? I was just trying to understand how long they live. Are they, short lifespans, long lifespans, in terms of rebounding from, environmental impacts?
Yeah, it's a pretty short lifespan. So in wildlife, there's two species types. There's R species and there's K species, and the difference between those is short-lived species that have quick reproduction rates and long-lived species that have slow reproduction rates. So like an elephant, for example, would be a K species with really long lifespan, really slow production rates. Most of the fur bearer species are R species, which are short lifespans and relatively fast reproduction rates. So they fall into that. I don't know specifically on a gray fox what their in the wild what their life expectancy is. Probably in the same range as of what I just talked about with the bobcats. Probably 4 to 6 years for a male, 6 to 8 for a female. But that's an assumption on my part. I don't actually know the data on the gray fox. But being an R species, I would assume that it's relatively a short lifespan.
Thank you, Russell. Further questions? Commissioner Drew.
Just, I guess, specific to the proposal here, one of the things we have is bobcat pelt sealing dates, which are obviously important to get the biological data we need. But I guess my question is, why the inconsistency with our times? I think the dates are probably fine, but you know, some of these same locations, one time it's 8 to 5, the next time it's 1 to 5. Some of them are 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So could you address that maybe a little bit for me in terms of why the inconsistency on the check-in times?
Right, and I haven't addressed that portion yet, and I will at your request.
Let's go ahead and cover that, and then when we do
Okay.
public comment, it'll include the rest of the CR.
So on the public pelt sealing dates, we've added some dates to this at the request of both the Trappers Association as well as various trappers and county advisory boards. We've added a day in Las Vegas to February 14th and in Panaca February 2nd, and then with the associated dates, and then a couple of the places we've in Fallon and in Tonopah, and then as well in Panaca there's some time changes there. The differences on the times really is attendance. Some of the cities, I've done this personally myself for many years out in the field, and some of the cities, the larger places, you might be busy all day long, but in some of the smaller locations, what you get is you can set an all-day sealing occurrence, and then nobody shows up. You end up spending 4 hours of your day sitting there waiting for someone to show up in order to accommodate them. And while I'm all in favor of accommodating all of our trappers as much as we can, I also value our biologists' time. And so these dates, all of the dates and all the times, I go out and I personally ask each of the biologists, because I figure it's better for them to schedule their days than for me. So these are all at the request of the biologists, and they're just responding to what they're seeing at their own sealing dates.
Thank you, Russell. Further questions for Russell? Commissioner Valentine.
Russell, Corey Lila with the Lincoln Cab asked me to request that the check-in date for Panaca for February 2nd, if it'd be possible to change that to February 16th.
And I saw that request on their cab report, so I did some follow-up with the biologist for Panaca, which is Cooper Munson, and asked him if that was something that would be feasible in his schedule, and he said that he could accommodate that, so that wouldn't be a problem from the department's perspective.
Further questions or comments from the commission? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hubbs.
I just, in terms of the gray fox and the bobcat, is opening up a season in response to providing more trapping opportunity or in order to stabilize populations? Like, is there a biological incentive to do it?
It's an opportunity. The population seems to be increasing, so biologically, we don't feel like there's going to be any large impacts of the population by increasing it. So it's just increasing the opportunity when the opportunity exists. Sean briefly mentioned additive mortality, and there's in biology, and I'm sorry to get too biological here sometimes. As a biologist, we can get carried away because we do get excited about some of this information. But so there's two types of mortality that we recognize in wildlife. There's additive mortality and there's compensatory. So compensatory mortality are a certain number of them. They have a certain survival rate. Let me back up on here. On here you see how there's a differing rate there for males and females after you get past the first year on how they have different survival. And it's influenced by how they live their life. So this is showing natural mortality. So naturally, a certain number of animals are going to die every year. From birth to year 1 for bobcats, it's about 31% survival rate for males in their first year, and just slightly higher than that, about 36 for females the first year of life to survive. So there's natural mortality, and we call that compensatory. When we remove animals from the population, we figure that we're removing the same number that would have naturally not survived anyway. So we're not impacting the population. So when you remove, if an animal dies of natural causes, or if we remove it as sportsmen, the resources that animal would have used are freed up for one of its counterparts. It increases their survivability. Additive mortality that Sean talked about with the chukar seasons and the quail seasons are when we start taking animals in addition to what would naturally die. So when the population's increasing, the number of animals that would naturally die increases also, because there's more competition going on. So by increasing the seasons when there's an increase in the population, it's still viewed as compensatory mortality, and we're not going to be adding mortality to the population. And so overall, there's no impact in our opinion.
Further questions from the commission before I take it to public comment? Seeing none, I'll take it out to public comment on the gray fox season, bobcat season, and the bobcat belt sealing dates.
Morning, my name's Brandon Buckles, for the record, and I would like to speak in support of the 120-day bobcat season. You saw on the reports that the bobcat population is increasing. The male bobcats, which do have the higher mortality rate, but they also feed on the young bobcats as part of the predation. I'd also like to thank Russell for all the research and contributing year after year that he does. And one thing that I've noticed being a trapper here in Nevada and having friends in other states is that Nevada prides itself on two things with the fur-bearing season, and that is research and a healthy population. And as the charts show, that 120-day season would continue the bobcat health and to make a stable population. And also the 100-day trapping season would allow trappers to go into the remote areas that they can't get to. Although here in southern Nevada, the weather is great all year long. Up north, by the time the bobcat season usually rolls around, a lot of the places are snowed in and you can't get to them. So having a 120-day trapping season would allow us to get into those sites that we normally can't attend, and that the trapping numbers and fur-bearing numbers are steadily declining. People aren't trapping as much as they were, or they're staying close to home. So this would allow us to go out to those areas to harvest those animals. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Further public comment?
My name's Dr. Paul Crawford. I'm representing myself, and I appreciate the hard work the department does for monitoring our populations. And I want to speak in favor of this increase in the season length for bobcat and gray fox for several reasons. Russell specifically said that it's not healthy for male to female ratio to be greater than 1 to 1, and right now we're at 1.61 to 1. So that would indicate that biologically we need to reduce population, so we need to increase seasons, because I don't think we're going to magically get more trappers out there. You know, also the data he shows that we had 2 top 5 seasons in the last 2 years. 40 years of data, 2 years of top 5 seasons for production. So not only are we producing more now, haven't been harvesting as many, and therefore the population dynamics are a little bit out of whack. And finally, he doesn't have any data, I don't think, that on gray fox, but just from personal observation down here in the southern part of the state, in Clark, Lincoln, and Nye County that I've been in over the last 2 months, there are a lot of gray fox out there right now. So a lot of tracks, a lot of scat, a lot of signs. So I think that they could easily support a longer season as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Dave Stowwater. I'm the district director for Clark and East Nye County for the Nevada Trappers Association. I don't want to sit here and repeat everything everybody else has said, but 120-day season for the gray fox and the bobcat, we highly recommend. 120 days might seem like a long time, but there's people not trapping out there constantly. Some people have days off, different times of the season. And with the data we have for 2 years, this is basically proof that we have the time to do it. Thank you much.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment? Come on up, Dr. Moley.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Don Moldy-Reno, speaking for Nevada Wildlife Alliance. I want to thank the department and Russell for presenting a little more information than has generally been presented in the past. My view of this process over the decades has been that it's pretty much been a secret how the recommendations are arrived at. Today is a little bit, was interesting from that point of view. I don't want to spend a lot of time nitpicking numbers, but Russell mentioned that 94 kittens per 100 was the highest that's ever been. Actually, that's not true. In 1980, it was 98. In 81, it was 107. In 1988, 109. And in 92, it was 110. So there have been years where things look better, and the trend data, as I've said before to you, doesn't look good. But here's what, after yesterday's somewhat jaw-dropping presentation by Jason Jones regarding commercial reptile protection collection, it gave me a way of thinking of this trapping issue in an entirely different way, and I'd like to present it briefly for your consideration. There are a lot of similarities between trapping and commercial reptile collection. For example, both are commercial activities. Wildlife are taken or killed for personal profit. That, of course, violates one of the sisters of the North American model, which speaks against commercialization of wildlife. In both of these activities, there are no quotas. There are no limits. The number of animals that can be taken are not regulated by you. Both of these activities, reptile collection and trapping, have very high impacts on non-target species. That's what our October lawsuit is going to be about. And you heard yesterday that reptile collection gets a lot of mammal activity. Trappers kill a high number of birds and animals every year in the course of their activities, which should be part of how you view this whole issue of trapping. Somebody on the commission yesterday marveled at how a $250 commercial reptile collection permit turned into a $200,000 paycheck for the year. In Nevada, some trappers kill over 100 bobcats a year. Not many, but some do. With a $40 trapping license, and an average bobcat bill price last year of somewhere around $400. $40 worth of a license gets you a $40,000 return on your investment, if you want to use that analogy. Interestingly as well, I think Jason said the chuck wallows go for about $250. A bobcat goes for approximately $400. So interestingly, the target species are even priced similarly with respect to commercial collection and trapping. And then, of course, there's the issue with law enforcement, which is a nightmare for both. I think Commissioner Johnson was talking yesterday about all these traps out there by the who knows how many and what's going to be done about it. Law enforcement spends a lot of time monitoring trapping activity as well. And I'll leave the numbers out of that, but both of these activities have high law enforcement impacts. And finally, what was interesting to me yesterday was Director Washley's report about the Supreme Court decision with respect to reptile collection a number of years ago. And apparently, if I understood it correctly, the burden to show no harm in an activity, according to the Supreme Court, rests with the perpetrator of that activity or the people who want to pursue it. And one of the ideas that came up yesterday, at least was implied, is that maybe commercial collection of reptiles should be terminated, and then it's the burden for the collectors to show no harm will occur if that activity is to pick up again. It seems to me you could make the same argument with trapping, that you could terminate trapping and then let the trappers have the burden of showing no harm. Just another way of thinking about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moldy. Further public comment?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commission. Jana Wright for the record. Today, the Commission will vote to have a 120-day season for bobcat and gray fox. I oppose the need for this amendment, and even though the data that Russell presented of the 2 years of the 94 kittens, this amendment is not needed. Why not wait till the next year when you set fur bearing season, that then you would have 3 years of data. I'd also like to say that there's never a conversation on setting a quota or specifying how many of these animals can be taken in certain hunt units. I see in the one portion of the trap survey, if there's anyone in the booth, it those that replied to the trapping survey, they're asked for the mountain range where the animal is taken. Why not ask for the hunt unit? Also, the trapping survey asked about untargeted species that are trapped. I'm sure this is on the NDOW website. I'm having difficulty finding the report that shows what untargeted animals are taken every season. Also, SB 364 was signed into law, pardon me, and the effective date is July 1st, 2017. I would think that the trap registrations forms currently used by the department could easily be changed to administratively so that those that choose to register their traps as required or the choice not to register them this coming season, they would be in compliance. I hope to see the new forms online in the near future to address the mandates of SB 364. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Myers from Las Vegas. Thank you for listening to me. I hate to think that the highest role that a bobcat can play on this planet is as a fashion statement or in a coat that someone wears in Russia or China. It's got to be more than that. You have the authority to set the bobcat and gray fox season. You can set it at 120 days. You can set it at 90 days. You could set it at 60 days or 30 days. You could even set it at 0 days. You have the authority to do that. Maybe you should think about that, because a bobcat is an incredible creature. It's a marvelous creature, and it has a place on this planet. It's not just a quagga mussel that we have to get off our boat. It's not a nuisance or a pest. It's a beautiful mammal. It has a place here, and you have the authority to do something about that. You also have the authority to set bag limits and quotas. Right now, there are none. You know, a trapper can go out and kill as many as he wants. You also have the authority to set limits on the number of traps, and you have not done that at all. What's a reasonable limit? 100, 1,000, 1,000,000? You also have the authority to set trap visitation. It's still 96 hours. It's still 4 days, 4 long suffering days, and you have not done that. Maybe someday you'll surprise us. Maybe someday you'll change that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Further public comment?
Thank you, Commission members. My name is Patrick Donnelly. I'm the Nevada Wildlife Advocate with the Center for Biological Diversity here in Las Vegas. We are a nationwide nonprofit with 1.4 million members and supporters nationwide and over 12,000 members and supporters here in Nevada. As a way of introduction, since we'll be getting to know each other quite well over the coming years, I've only been in Nevada for a few months. I have a degree in restoration ecology and environmental policy. My background's in arid land ecology and botany. Wildlife is new to me, other than endemic fishes. So I'm going to relate some of our general stances on trapping to you as a way of encouraging you not to adopt the regulation on the bobcat season. The Center believes that the highest priority of agencies responsible for public trust resources, such as wildlife and public land, must be to pursue policies which restore native biodiversity, managing for a whole ecosystem rather than for specific species. Robust carnivore populations are essential to the restoration of proper ecosystem function. For too long, carnivores have been prosecuted, with huge reductions in numbers over the past 200 years. This is an example of managing an entire landscape for the benefit of just a few target species. I'd like to say that our stance on trapping is not about hunting. There are many staff members who put an elk in the freezer every winter, and we believe it is a valid and high use of our public lands. But trapping is not hunting. Trapping is the commercial exploitation of a public trust resource for the economic gain of an incredibly small proportion of the population. Trapping is an indiscriminate means of managing wildlife. As some others have the data to illustrate, incidental take of non-target species is an enormous problem, and it's affecting wildlife on a landscape scale. And there is no specific plan on how to reduce incidental take. It's an illustration of the fundamental incompatibility of trapping with the public trust. Trapping has significant ecological consequences. Intensively trapped areas can have localized extirpations, which can have significant cascading trophic effects on the ecosystem. And when these severe localized extirpations are replicated across the landscape, this can lead to an extreme cumulative impact affecting the entirety of an ecoregion. And I would offer that this is particularly exacerbated in the Mojave Desert portion of the state, and I would encourage you in the future to consider split seasons with a reduced amount of trapping time in the Mojave Desert, reflecting the relative paucity of wildlife compared to the Great Basin part of the state. Trapping is also inhumane, causing a terrifying and excruciatingly painful death to the animals unfortunate enough to meet their end in a trap. I guess this leads into that there needs to be a fundamental reorientation of wildlife policy in the state toward restoring a natural balance with robust carnivore populations. this could mean declines in ungulate populations. Their numbers are significantly lower than historical pre-European levels, but there are landscape scale changes to ecosystems from cattle grazing, groundwater depletion, mineral exploitation, invasive grasses, and a whole host of other influences which have influenced that decline. Indiscriminately killing carnivores will not solve the ungulate problem if considered at a broader ecosystem level scale. Therefore, on these general principles, we would oppose any extension or increase in the length of fur bearer seasons. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Paul Crawford, for the record. I have to reply in regards to allegations made by both the Center for Biological Diversity and Dr. Moldy.
Sir, you've already spoke on this.
I'm rebutting claims that they may, no? Okay.
No, we don't do that.
All right, so maybe someone else can speak to that.
Further public comment?
Sean Shea, Washoe County. I just wanted to get up here and say that Washoe County approved this as written. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. Further public comment?
Paul Dixon, Clark Cab. All I'll say is that Clark Cab approved the trapping as recommended by NDOW, with the exception of asking, like Lincoln County, for the Panaca sealing date to be moved a couple of weeks, so to give a little more time for people to get their stuff together before the first sales and do things. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
For the record, Bob Rittenhouse, the Douglas County Cab. Our cab discussed this trapping extension, and we do approve the extended period for the Bobcat. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion or motion. Commissioner Hubbs?
I have a question in regard to an issue that Ms. Wright brought up in terms of non-targeted species. Are we reporting what has been taken from traps in general statewide that were non-targeted?
Can you answer that for us, Russell?
Russell Wilson, Department of Wildlife, for the record. There is a record of that. It is not online, but most of our data is not online, but it is available. Be made available to those who request that information. So, but there is a record of that.
Just a follow-up question. So, from your experience with some of that, are you able to tell us what's the largest non-targeted species taken from traps?
The species that are most harvested as non-targets are the rabbit species. So that's the largest number of things that are taken in traps. But there are 4 species of rabbits, and there's no specification which species are being taken. That includes black-tailed jackrabbits, white-tailed jackrabbits, cottontails. Pygmy rabbits are out there, but they're very unlikely to be taken because they're so light they would probably not trigger a trap.
Vice Chairman Johnston?
I just wanted to, I think when the season was initially set, I was by myself in support of the 120-day season. Given the information that's been provided to us by the department, I think I'm comfortable again with the recommendation on the seasons. I guess my one question is, there's oftentimes questions about bag limits and quotas, but at this point in time, the department does not see a need to do that, given the population trends for the bobcat.
when you start getting into seasons and bags, there's a lot of interesting things that goes on. Utah is one of our neighboring states that has a quota on that, and it's fairly well understood that in Utah what happens is that for an example, if I was a trapper and I've got a quota, I'm going to get my wife a license, I'm going to get my kids a license, I'm going to get grandma a license, and it doesn't seem to slow it down. What it does do is people start to two things. There's a sociological phenomenon that goes on with quotas, and I think anybody that's ever been a fisherman has probably experienced this before. If you have a daily quota of 8 and you catch 6 fish in the first 2 hours of the morning when the fishing's really good, I know a lot of guys that will spend the next 8 hours sitting in that boat or on the bank trying to catch the last 2 because that's their quota, and that's what they're entitled to, and they're going to get their quota before they go home. So there's a strange phenomenon of the people you give them a quota, they will match the quota. They will push for that because that's what they're allowed, and that's when the incidents in Utah where people are getting additional licenses for additional family members so they can still continue to get the number that they want to harvest. The other thing that happens in Utah is when you're allowed a certain number of bobcats, they see people start high grading, meaning when they catch bobcats, you have a choice of the last year, the average price pelt for bobcats was $265, right in that range. Males were worth that and more in some cases. Females and juvenile cats that were smaller in size were garnering $40, $50. So if you're allowed to capture 3 or 5 or 7 bobcats and you catch a $40 one versus a $400 one, people start to high grade, and those juvenile cats and those female cats start disappearing on the walk home by the less than some less than honest people. And not everyone's doing this. This is just, I don't need to go into the details of how ethics in wildlife works. We all know, but and so the number of bobcats being removed from the population doesn't necessarily drop at all. And instead, what you do is you start losing your biology, because when the bobcats that are turned in are just the high-graded ones, all of a sudden my data gets really, really skewed, because it shows that instead of 161 males to 100 females, we have 300 males to 100 females, because the data gets skewed because of the high grading. That's a concern that I have as a biologist. I also start losing the production values because kittens are also being high graded in the process. So it's a real concern there. When I look at our data in Nevada, when I look at last year's data, and I'm pulling these numbers from memory, so I may be off, but just slightly if I am, about 65% of all of our trappers take 5 or fewer bobcats. And when I break that down, when you get up to about 20 or fewer bobcats, it's about 95% of our trappers. So the number that are taking excessive numbers is really, really low. Most guys are doing this recreationally because they enjoy it. It's time that they get to spend out in the field doing what they love to do. And like I said, 65% or more are taking, the largest proportion of that 65% realistically is 1 to 3 bobcats. I'm gonna take it up to 5 because that's just how we do things in our mortal minds. We start counting, by these numbers. All these numbers can be shifted if you start shifting numbers around, and I realize that. Those are just the numbers that I pulled up just out of my biological curiosity. This isn't something that the department tracks. It's just my own question. I hope that answers your question, Commissioner Johnston. You were the one that asked that, weren't you? I don't remember now.
I was. It does.
Okay.
Thank you.
I rambled for so long I forgot. So
I appreciate the information.
Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Russell, the numbers, the ratios that were generated were based on statewide numbers.
Correct.
And we all know that there's a huge change from a climate standpoint across the state. What do those numbers look like regionally? Is there a concern regionally that is one area super high and that's compensating for an area that might be lower?
So, first off, the reason why I address the numbers statewide is because a lot of times I do track them. This is my data sheet that goes out, and this has been made available to the public as well. But we do track it regionally and also eco-regionally. And I'm looking down the numbers. You know, there's nothing this year that stands out. The reason why I do it statewide is because I also track it by our individual management areas. But the concern biologically is that when I start breaking down into the smaller areas, I start to get concerned about the sample size. And so I just look at it on a statewide level, and that way I'm aware. But I do track all of that, and I do consider everything that's in there. So the lowest one in here is Region 2 is 70 kittens per 100. And the basin and range portion of our state, eco-regionally, is 71 kittens per 100, which are both relatively high. The Mojave region was 120 kittens per 100 this year. So I do consider all those. I just report it on a statewide basis for simplicity, largely in this meeting, not going through every one of our management areas, but also because of my biological concerns of the sample size.
Does that hold true with the male to female ratios as well?
Yeah, the lowest one on the list is the Mojave region, which was 150 males per 100 females, also quite high. The long-term data is for the Mojave is 147 males per female, and the 10-year average is 139 males per female for the Mojave. So we're above both the 10-year and the long-term averages there as well.
Commissioner Hubbs.
I just wanted to give my thoughts. I mean, I'm trying to, I do understand that there is a history of trapping in our state, and I'm trying to also go with my gut to some respect. But in terms of our carnivores, it always seems that there's a common theme, and that's that it's difficult to accurately track or estimate population numbers. They're fairly cryptic and not easy to go out and monitor readily. I don't see them getting the time and attention given to ungulates as well. And I think, in my opinion, it seems that quotas, they do arise when there is a need or concern to follow numbers of individual animals out in the population to make sure that there's not an over-harvest. And I do understand that they can be skewed and that your friends can go get a hunt or a trapping license once your quota is set, but I think also it allows the department to start to fix numbers, so there's just not an indefinite amount of resources being taken. And I know I get some communication from the public as to their concern for trapping, and I think today I'm going to choose to be a voice for those species. And if I can do so by not supporting an extended season, I will do so most likely today for those reasons.
Further commission comments? Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Russell, on the, when it comes to, with predators, when we're dealing with coyotes, as far as my understanding, when we put pressure on them, they respond. Their population responds. They have a little higher survival rate. They have bigger litters, maybe more frequent, whatever it is, to respond to the fact that, there's prey available, that, you've reduced their numbers, they can handle more. If I apply that same concept to bobcats, then it seems like kind of a no-win, because we're in one side, we're saying biologically having too many males can be biologically detrimental, but if we're putting pressure on them, Are we introducing more of the population? I mean, you know, it's just a natural cycle, I guess. So I kind of look at it as maybe there's a wash there. I mean, it's just, it boils down to opportunity. We're not damaging population according to the numbers, but we're not necessarily resolving any problems either. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's something, you know, that all of us have sat in meetings and heard people talk about. Well, when you reduce a predator species, then they tend to respond by increasing their numbers, and that's there's primary research in Nevada that shows that, and elsewhere as well, but for bobcats that's true as well. And I spoke about it briefly earlier, that when competition is reduced, it increases survivability of others of the same species, and production was shown in Nevada to absolutely go up with the removal of adults from the population. That increased kitten survivability, and the populations overall started to increase. There was a period of time when I first came to the state, and shortly before I got here in the early 2000s, late 90s, when there wasn't a lot of interest in bobcat trapping, and the harvest greatly reduced during that time period, and what the record shows during that time is that kitten production fell off to really, really low numbers during that time period. And the belief is that was largely because of and it was somebody in the public mentioned this earlier, about males preying on kittens. And when the population starts to increase, that's one of the responses a population and many predator species will do, is the adults will turn to the young for a food source if there's no other food source. As the population expands and puts a greater impact on the prey species, then they start looking, they're opportunists. They're looking for any opportunity to have a meal, and a lot of times that opportunity becomes their own offspring. So I absolutely do see that there's that, you know, it's kind of a double-handed sword where people say, well, the department's predator projects have no impact because when you remove them, they just increase in number. But then on the other hand, we hear when it comes to trapping, oh, they're being reduced so much that how will they ever come back from that? And the response is the same no matter what the activity is, whether it's from the department or recreationally.
Further questions? Commissioner Hubbs?
I was just, on that note, I mean, I'm thinking if it's a wet, you know, we're talking really, I think a lot about the water too. I mean, we had such a wet winter. There's a lot of resources, but their resources, you know, are different in nature than an ungulate's resource. I mean, where you're going to have vegetative growth, there's going to need to be a need for increased predators with increased game. It's kind of a balance. So, I mean, they're responding to increases in population numbers in other species, typically. So, I don't really think that I don't see how that would change its, I mean, obviously, if their species is known for their males to prey on their young, I'm assuming any day they would take a larger or a baby deer or something in that nature, or whatever they could over their young. I think that would be their normal tendency, right?
Yeah, correct. And what you said is absolutely right. It's you know, they call it the food web for a reason. When precipitation goes up, vegetation growth goes up, the herbivore species respond to that. They can have greater survivability because there's more food for them. Because they have greater survivability, their populations increase. Because they're increased, the predator species can opportunize on that, and then their numbers increase. You're absolutely right. So it continues up that food web in both directions, you know.
Further questions or a motion?
Make a motion. I'm going to motion today not to extend the season for the gray fox and the bobcat as presented for the 2017 trying to go into the season. I guess it would be for the 2017 season.
I have a motion by Commissioner Hubbs. Do I have a second? Seeing none, the motion dies for a lack of a second.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve that portion of CR 16-13 Amendment Number 1 regarding fur-bearing animals, the gray fox season, bobcat season, bobcat pelt sealing dates as presented by the department with the following change, that the bobcat pelt sealing date in Panaca will be changed from February 2nd to February 16th.
I have a motion by Commissioner Johnston and a second by Commissioner Valentine to approve the gray fox season, bobcat season, and bobcat pelt sealing dates as presented by the department with the following change to Panaca, changing the date from February 2nd to February 16th. Are there any questions on the motion? Commissioner McNinch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, you know, I struggle with this, I'll be honest with you, you know, but in fairness, with my thought process, when their season's been reduced in the past, you know, it's an easier jump for me than when it's increased. But the concept of why that's moving, I'm still more comfortable with it than I am with things like the bears in particular. I struggle with some of the science behind that, or some of the, maybe the numbers, maybe it's not long enough term, I don't know. But while I wish there was a better way, and I've said this before, to monitor populations of some of our fur bearers, and maybe talk more about quotas and putting some things in place that might feel a little better. The bottom line is that it's the same science that's going up and down, and I'm trying to respect the fact that I moved from the 120 to the 90 pretty easy. Going from 90 to the 120 is a little harder jump for me, but it's just because of the social aspect of it. It's the not necessarily understanding all the dynamics from a biological standpoint. A little more discomfort than I do with the ungulate species. So I'm trying to be fair with my process, my thought process. So I will support the motion. I wish things were different. I wish there were better, more comfortable ways for me on the science end, but I think that's just where I stand. The numbers are there. It seems like it. They don't seem to be tanking in that sense. So I was concerned about the regional aspect. I feel a little better about that we're not cutting a region off somewhere because of a statewide average that's high somewhere else. So I'll support the motion, even though I'm not real, you know, it's not my favorite thing at this point in time. But
Thank you, Commissioner McNinch. Any further comments on the motion?
I just would agree with David. I mean, the biological data is there to support the changes. So I'm going to be supporting that based on the data that was presented.
Commissioner Johnston.
I just have one final comment. There was a suggestion in public comment that this commission should be looking at fur bearer trapping in the same way it was looking at the commercial collection of reptiles, and that's a apples to oranges issue. This type of trapping that we're talking about here is legal. The pitfall trap was an illegal method of commercial reptile collection. So to me, it's an apples and oranges comparison, because we're talking about a legal activity here, and we have methods that are legal for the commercial reptile collection, and these pitfall traps are not in compliance with those methods. So that method in of itself is illegal, and that's the problem we're dealing with, is that illegal method. So I don't look at them as the same for that very important reason in my mind.
Further comments, or I'm going to call for the question? I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 7-1 with Commissioner Hubbs, the dissent. We will close agenda item number 19 And let's take a break until 10:30.